Welcome to the Angelscapes podcast, where you're encouraged to uncover and develop a direct connection with your soul's power, wisdom, and spiritual intuition that is ready to blossom. We'll explore new ideas, compelling tips, and real steps to help you learn simple spiritual practices. We're a safe place to learn more about accessing your soul's power with education and spiritual wholeness that could bring more clarity to your life. Now here's your host, a practicing medium, Akashic Records practitioner, spirit artist, coach, and mentor, Dr. Reverend Nancy Smith.
Do you know what you can trust in life? Do you know who you can trust in life? And how do you know what's really, really real? Where do you check in? Who do you call or who do you not call? Hello, this is Angelscapes podcast, and I'm your host, Nancy Smith. And in this episode, we're going to talk about the language of God, or who or what is God. Source, creator. God is a loving energy that is pervasive and all-knowing. And you can create a one-on-one relationship with Source, God, creator of all that is. And I want to talk about how you do that. So what is God? You know, I've being a medium and being a reverend, that's a question that kind of is always we're walking around the elephant talking about it. And in my book, Divine Love Affair, I talk about creation myths throughout the world, throughout time, history of humanity. Some of it is even pre-written. It's all verbal, story to story. And we would go from Mongolia to ancient Turkey to the Norse to Native American to Indian. In the book, I explore all of these myths. And what I found to be true is man's or humanity's hunger for something beyond itself. There must be a reason for this. There must be there must be something beyond what I know to be true. There must be a truth there. It seems to be a theme. And the theme also is humanity struggling to know what they can trust, what is real, what is beyond the pain of existence, if you want to, because pain of existence is real. The struggle is real. So I wanted to talk a little bit about not just God, but what God is, and does God exist, and how does God exist? In the spiritualist principles, there's a little bit of history on how they express God, or how they talk about who and what God is. And kind of starting around the 1850s, spiritualism. And the reason I talk about spiritualism, not just that I'm a spiritualist minister, but also there's a really unique shift that happens with spiritualism about the concept of God, about the relationship that the spiritual people of spiritualism have. The relationship with God changes. And it's a really interesting change. We go coming out of history to the king is in between common man and God, and the king is the one that says this is how it works, and this is how we communicate with God, and these are the rules. And he's the punisher, and he's the maker of rules based on God's thought. He's somehow been given the reign to talk. And this goes on for centuries and centuries. And then right around the 1700s, things start to change, and the revolution of emancipation from America, from England, starts a new thought process, believe it or not, from what I gather. And then in the late 1800s, there is a lot of talk about breaking away from that, not just Christianity, but the fact that there's something between us and God becomes more one-on-one, a relationship with that can be built through trust, through prayer, through meditation. We have the Shakers, we have the Quakers, and we have a number of burgeoning movements that connect directly to source, directly to God. So as the spiritualists developed, starting in the 1850s, they start to make statements or develop principles. And one of the first three principles coming out of spiritualism was man is a spirit here and now, and spirit has an unbroken and continued existence after the change called death. And spirit can, under favorable conditions, communicate with those here on the earth plane. And as they talk about God, the concept was started with our God is the universal Father, and then began to develop into this is a world governed by God of love and mercy, in which all things work together for the good to those who reverently conform to his eternal law. So God begins to become part of an eternal law, a part of a natural law system. And in 1864, a stronger statement was made. God is a beneficent power and wise intelligence that pervades and controls the universe, sustaining all human beings, the intimate relationship of a parent. So God is still a parent, whose revelation is nature and whose interpretation is science, and whose most acceptable worship is doing good to all. And so there's a shift here. God is still a parent, and God is still creating organizations that they're calling natural law, and science is taking a look at this natural law, and you see the flow of continuity with God. And to worship God is no longer a sacrifice. It becomes must do good for everyone, and that is your relationship with God. And then right around 1871, is a sense of I believe in God and I believe in a fatherhood of God. So we're still having a developmental parental look at who and what God is. And in 1893, a little shift. I affirm a belief in the continuity of life and its operations in accordance with intelligent law. Spiritualism starts to really dive deep into what is natural law, what is spiritual law, what is that intelligent law, meaning the source, what is the design behind God. And later in 1899, it's the principle of God's simplified into we believe in infinite intelligence, and God became an intelligence. And then back in the day, a fellow named Joseph Whitwell tried to explain this principle of God. By this, we express our belief in a supreme impersonal power present everywhere and manifesting as life through all forms of organized matter, called by some God, others call it spirit, and spiritualists call it infinite intelligence. Though this power is impersonal, our understanding can only be gained by our personal perception of this creative force. I thought they covered all the bases with this one, but basically, spiritualism is moving into God being impersonal, meaning an energy. I think it is how I perceived it to be. And although we perceive this energy through our own spiritual practices, our own creative, our own intuition. And another explanation that comes much later in 1964, called the fatherhood of God, is the core belief of the religious philosophy of spiritualism, is that the acceptance of a divine energy. And this force, whatever name it's given, has created all there is and sustains all its creation. The spirit of God, the essence of God, exists within and around everything. It is within all of us. We are all children of God, and so are part of one family. We begin to talk about the one mind. We acknowledge God as our Father. We're still in the parental area. So then what spiritualism is embracing, and what I feel is kind of the modern understanding of what God could be, is a universal force that is manifested to us through nature. This source has been given many names: God, the Great Spirit, or the Infinite. In Native American comes the Great Spirit concept. It's all inclusive, it's omnipotent, and it's omnipresent. It's manifest in all forms of life and matter. So God becomes the life force. In in this understanding of a God, the life force energy that flows through all of life throughout the galaxy. And the understanding of the universe and its origin and its government is basically boiled down to the origin of the universe is basically unknown. It's an aggregate of various forces of matter and energy, always appears to move in the same manner under the same conditions, following the laws of nature. And it's governed by the law of order, meaning that if you understand how things flow and you're connected, and it's not going to make all of a sudden a big change that is not part of a pattern. So if you understand the pattern, in 2017, Barry Oates wrote, "The fatherhood of God is basically the essence of life. God is the center of the universe, ensuring that order and harmony exist, which enables us to thrive in the galaxy in which we live." So now the concept of God has grown much bigger in this 21st century. Without God, we are nothing. With God, we are everything. Seeing God as the essence of life should reassure individuals that all life is equal, and this equality does not stop at your relationships with your fellow humans. It extends to all forms of life, from humble amoebas to the brainiest of academics. And this is, I feel, such a huge step in when you look at the history of humanity and the beliefs, the spiritual beliefs of God and religion. Spiritualism takes these ginormous leaps into talking about God as impersonal, talking about God as energy, a life force that flows through everyone, that connects us together. And we are, in a sense, an essence of God. We are an essence of the Creator. So how do we journey into knowing God? Let me talk a little bit about how I journeyed into knowing God. And when I was moving from Catholicism into a larger understanding of my spiritual connection with Source, God, as I refer to God, sometimes it makes sense to refer to God in another terms as the creative source, the creative life force energy that is the source of all being. And in my book, Divine Love Affair and Akashic Journey, I write about God as we're created from unconditional love. And when we pass, we return to this unconditional love. And that unconditional love is the source. It's the energy. It's the creative life force energy that it's God. And while we're alive here, having our two-dimensional lives, three-dimensional lives, we endeavor to know who God is. We endeavor to bring that creative, unconditional love into our lives as we live it, so we could have that experience. But we're limited. We're not an energy source. We're much denser. We are energy, but we are much denser than the energy source of spirit, of God. So our experience of the creative life force energy is much different than when we are in spirit form. That's a lot of philosophy. That's a lot of talking. So realistically, how can I tell a story that will help understand the process of coming into a relationship of God or source or unconditional love? When I first started studying spiritualism and started looking at the fact that there is God is energy, God is source, and there is no vicarious atonement, that we are responsible for our own development. I said, geez, this sounds like a lot like my own dad, when you call the father a God. And I'm thinking, my dad here, I'm going to have another relationship with somebody who is distant and remote and really can't connect. It's impersonal. And I said, well, I don't know if I'm on for this. I kind of hesitated but it was the connections that I had with my guides, with those people who have passed over to the other side, and I was communicating with them. That's where I got my spirituality. That's where I started to understand source. But the big leap into the big source was soon to come. But I was not wanting to get into another relationship with another being who was just far, far, far away. And as I developed my mediumship skills, And I began, and I started to be more and more aware of what a soul journey was, and what we're born to do, and what we're born to learn. I began to have another look at my dad. I began to look see him from more of a human point of view, and more of what's his soul journey, what's he here to learn. And I began to distance myself from, I'm an adult. He's a man that used to be my father, kind of thing. And something happened, something changed between us. I went, as I was going through a divorce. I had two small children at the time, and it was a big deal. And he drove out to with my mom to see me, and he took me out on my own, one-on-one with my dad. It's very rare. And he just talked to me in a way, in a very vulnerable way, that I'd never heard him talk to me like this before. And he just went on to say how hard it is to be a father, how hard it was to have a marriage. We had nine, there were 9 kids. He said I had to keep 11 mouths. I had to feed 11 mouths. I had to make enough money. I had to be there. I had to keep a roof over their head. And he said I was overwhelmed. I was terrified. I was scared, and I didn't know what to say. I didn't know what to do. I just did the best I could each day, and I was running by the seat of my pants. And we kind of were laughing over that, but it was so true, because he was in his being overwhelmed. What he didn't realize, and I think he was starting to understand, that he couldn't make a personal connection to each one of us individually, because he was overwhelmed with the big picture and couldn't hone into us as individuals. There's 9 of us. That's a lot of us. And things for me began to fall into place. But the fact that he reached out to me in a very intimate way began to change my sense of a father figure having an intimate relationship where both of us count, where heart to heart connection. And we continued, not every week or not every day, maybe once a year, these intimate conversations where he would begin to say to me different things about his life and reveal some of his struggles. And later on, my mom became very ill, as paraplegic for like 17 years. And we occasionally would have conversations that were, again, intimate. And here he was talking about what he thought he did wrong in his life, what he thought he could improve on in his life to connect with others. And I realized that his soul's journey was really about learning how to have relationships with, because he was so distant. And life just kept bringing people, 9 people, and then a difficult relationship with my mother through health problems. And he was really learning how to have relationships. And as I watched him try to grasp this, I kind of thought about the fatherhood of God. So maybe God isn't meaning to be so distant and so difficult. So I began to learn sitting in the power. It's a deep, deep meditation. Kind of, you could almost call it trance. It probably is trance, where you could learn trance. There's many levels to trance. It's basically a meditation where you start with the breathing, and you go past your mind, and then you go past your thoughts and your worries, and then you go underneath those to your visions. I had a lot of visions. I was a medium. I could connect with spirits. You go past that, and to a few different layers, until you are completely connected with source. You're completely connected with that ebb and flow of source. And we're built to do that, believe it or not. In my studies, and I've written a lot about it in my book, Divine Love Affair and Akashic Journey, about what that flow, what that connection means to us, and how we can connect to it. The language of God is not English or Spanish or any other language on the planet. It's a language of energy. It's a language of connection energetically between source and us. And it's not what we think it is. That connection with source is outside of our mind. We have to be out of our minds to connect with source and to feel the flow and the ebb and flow. And as the ebb and flow moves through us, moves through me, it centers in my heart. And it's a vibrational thing that runs through my entire body. So after sitting in the power, sitting in source, as I come out of it, especially when I'm practicing it like every day and doing really well with it, my mind begins to change, and the images and the thoughts and the perceptions that I have begin to shift. I see things differently in my everyday life because the vibration within myself is different, and the language of that vibration instructs my mind to go in a different direction. See, our minds are computers, and our hearts have the wisdom, and our hearts um, are meant to direct our minds. So if we are doing it backwards, our minds are going, and we're living through anxiety. That anxiety is telling our minds, go find more of this or protect me from this. And that's all our minds know how to do. But if we shift to that source energy, the source begins to influence our hearts and our sense of well-being, that we're now connected to one power, the one mind, and the mind responds to it quite nicely. It's amazing how that works. It took me years to figure that out, and I wanted to share that with you. If you want to step into a meditative practice, this is the result of that. You begin to create a one-on-one source with spirit. So here's this, going back to the story of my dad. He had a stroke in his upper 80s, and he began to become very weak. And we began to see, his mind, he was struggling, and he was coming to the end of things, and very frustrated. And I saw his vulnerability in a whole new way. And so as I saw his vulnerability, I also really let go of some of the beliefs I had around fatherhood and the fatherhood of God, and my relationship to that whole concept of fatherhood. It's better when I don't say God the Father. It really is. But my sense of things shifted. And when my father passed, he ended up going into a coma for several days. And I had flown out to sit with him. I slept the first night of the coma. I got there just in time, and I just slept overnight. It was Christmas Eve, and then I just prayed and kind of sat there and talked to him in my head. I didn't want to disrupt him. I was kind of shy about the whole thing, but he was just there. I was present for him, and I don't know if he knew it. But then they sent us home. They said, "Go home for Christmas. Have your Christmas. Go to bed and come back." December 26th is when we came back, and I did not like that idea at all, but I followed their instructions. I did need a good night's sleep, and then came back December 26th, and he was coming to the final. Well, it seemed like that coma could last forever, to be honest with you, but he was kind of there. And so I sitting and fidgeting, and then I said, you know what? I have all these mediumship skills. Why don't I use my mediumship skills to just blend with him and sit with him in a spiritual way, and, with spirit to spirit? What could that hurt? I'm not trying to make anything happen. I'm not trying to have him go to the other side. I just want to sit with him during his process, because his process is his process. And this is something for anyone who has worked with someone who's, in transitioning, or if you're stepping into a time when you're with somebody who's transitioning, they got to do it on their own. They have their own time, their own way, their own spiral. So there I was, deciding to blend with my dad. A mediumship skill, one of the mediumship skills is you blend with spirit, and then spirit blends with you, and you have this give and take back and forth. Only this time I wouldn't be explaining the spirit to somebody else. I'm just with them. So I was free to go a little deeper, and I blended with him. And I was saying, am I doing this right? And then finally, boom, I just felt a presence. And I knew it was my dad. I felt that it was my dad, but it felt so different than my dad. It was actually a different even color, a different texture. It's like, Dad, I didn't know you had this with you. I didn't know you had this aspect with you. And I would just stay there for, a good hour and a half. And I have to go back and step back a little bit. And before my dad had the stroke, he began to talk about himself in ways that he had never talked to us before. So a couple of evenings in a row, we were sitting there with my sisters at the dining room table, and he started talking about stories of when he was really little, and when his dad died when he was 4, and he kind of grew up in the Depression where his mom was working, and he was kind of riding free, a little too young to be riding that free, and got a little bit wild. And he had lots of uncles. They were kind of not into taking care of family. They were just that kind of family, kind of distant and not involved. And he got himself into a lot of trouble sometimes, and sometimes felt very, very lonely. A little 8-year-old with no adults watching him, and eventually he was moved to Philadelphia from Toledo, Ohio, miles and miles away, long, long train ride away, where he grew up with his uncle and his aunt and his cousin, his 2 cousins. I think they were 3 altogether. And so he started to share, not so much saying how he felt, but as he shared the story, you could feel his development and his belief systems. And we as sisters talked about it later. He doesn't know how to connect with people because nobody connected with him as a young child. They just moved him from place to place. And we were going, that's why we were raised the way we were. That's why we were given the skills we were given. And so coming back now to he's passing, and I'm blending in with him, and I'm feeling in essence a part of him that I had never felt before. Like I said, colors, textures were all not anything I would ever put with my dad if you were to ask me. So it was lovely. It was a lovely exchange. There's no words. There was no stories telling. It was just a peace and a calm and a connection. And then finally, I was told, this is as far as you can go. You have to go back now. You have to wake up. So I came back to myself, and I just was kind of looking at him saying, well, that was really nice being with you, Dad. And then I saw the lights just leaving him, just lights going up from the top of his head. And I said, is that your spirit? Is that you? You're passing. And it was just amazing. It was just absolutely amazing. And then I was guided, strongly guided to leave the room. Um, I'm not sure why I had to leave the room. My sister and my brother-in-law were there, but I was told to, in my heart of hearts, get, and I think it was because I traveled with him so far from spirit. So as I left the room, go to the bathroom, call a friend, come back, he had passed physically. His body stopped working, and I feel like I must have been still kind of attached to him or something, and that was not going to be good for me. When he stopped breathing, I don't know. I can make up these stories till the cows come home. Those are questions I had for spirit when I get over to the other side. But what I felt was that direct connection with spirit in a way that I had never felt before. It was just a beautiful miracle. And it shifted and changed my relationship with source, with God, with the creator, and the sense that it's energy, and it's a very loving, caring energy. And when we learn to speak the language of the energy through our intuition, and our physical body can actually help us to know this feels good, this doesn't feel good, this is a sense of well-being. Our physical body responds really well to that life force energy. We get healthy, we feel better, we're happier. So that's how we know physically, that's how we can prove to ourselves this is the presence of God within me. Because when nature is right, that's where God is, in nature. And we are nature. Our physical bodies are part of nature, and we need to respect and listen to us, not necessarily listening to the aches and pains and the groans and the depressions and the sadnesses and the angers, but to move ourselves to a balanced place of a balance of well-being, and then that joy will grow within us. So I wanted to so since then I want to talk to you about a student of mine, a mediumship student. We were working on mediumship skills and trusting intuition, and really she was learning to step back from her mind and how she thought things would work and how she wanted things to work, into surrendering, or to being more available to spirit. That's another thing, learning the language of God, surrender. There's a lot of surrender in there. And she told me that she was really struggling with her father, and her father-in-law were both at the end of life. They're both transitioning. And she had been talking to me about how frustrated she was about, why do we have to suffer for so long? There's only one end to this. Why do we have to hover? And she had been sitting with them and just kind of telling them, you can go into the light. It's time to pass. It's okay. We're letting you go. And no, it just wasn't working. And she was leaving these times with her father-in-law and her father, very frustrated and restless. And I said, you know what? Why don't we blend with their spirits? And I told her about the story of my dad. And I said, why don't you blend with their spirits? And so we opened up sacred space. And we invited spirit. She said, there's a lot of spirits here that I've already passed, mother-in-law, grandmothers, and then the table was full. And then she said, but I see my father, but he won't come in. And I felt like, ask your father-in-law to come in. So she asked him to come in, and they kind of stood at a distance. And they didn't want to enter her sacred space, but they were kind of standing there at the doorway talking to her. And her father-in-law really spoke up quite clearly. He said, I like it when you're there. It's nice when you're there. I can feel it when you're there. He was in a coma. I can feel it when you're there, but stop talking about death, will you? Just stop talking about death. And he gave her instructions of what he wanted from her. For instance, he had 4 sons and a daughter-in-law and a daughter. He's like, I only want my sons to touch me and take care of me. And I want you to just be gentle and calm and quiet for me. And she was like surprised that she never would have thought that that would be the case. So as she spoke to him, her father started to speak up. And sometimes we think this is our imagination kind of talking to us, but I have to say this was so opposing to what she had been describing to me about her, this end of life care with both her fathers, that I thought there's something going on here. So she spoke to her father. Her father said, yeah, stop talking about the death stuff. He said, when you told me about the memories in the lake, when we all went to the lake and had a blast, that was the best time ever. I love hearing about that. Tell me more lake stories. Tell me more memories that made you happy, but don't talk to me about death, and don't, just stop it. I got to do what I got to do. So in the end of the session, the meditative session, it was kind of a journey that I took her on. The father-in-law, who turned to her father, they didn't even know each other, and could put his hand on his back. He goes, I'm going to help you with this death thing. We're going to figure this out. I'll be helpful to you. And she said, why would he say that? Why would this happen? And we came out of the session. She was mystified, but amazed. And I was amazed. And so the session ended. And then an hour later, she texted me. She says, will you please call me? Call me right away. I called her. Well, during that session, with her father-in-law coming in and speaking so clearly to me, he had just passed. And as he had just passed, he turned to her father and said, I'm going to help you do this. I'm going to help you figure this out. And it made sense. And we were both amazed. We were both astounded. And isn't spirit wonderful? Isn't spirit just amazing? That we are, this to me proved the continuity of life. It was an intimate conversation and an intimate session between the two of us. And to her, it also proved the continuity of life and showed her a lot. It was a lot of learning in that situation. And I'm sharing these stories to you so that you can kind of get an illustration of what spirit is all about and what the return back to God is all about. It's you're returning to an energetic form, and you're returning to the energetic home of God, the creative life force energy. And I feel that understanding that concept for me, that this energetic, it's not as impersonal as I have read. It's energy, but energy is not impersonal. It's very loving. It's all pervasive. It's all knowing. And there is a huge amount of compassion and generosity in that energy. And that energy understands us more than we understand ourselves, but more than we understand source. So having a relationship with source is a learning process of trust and faith. And I highly recommend it. Even just going out and sitting in nature and just watching nature flow in and out. I know nature can be brutal, and it has a flow of its own, but it also can be very calming and very beautiful, and can bring yourself back to the presence of God. There's a fellow, John Muir, the Muir Woods out in California, the redwood trees, where he spoke about that a lot. He has a lot of writings about that, about being in the woods, being close to nature, and up in Walden's Ponds, Thoreau, Waldo, Emerson, all those guys. I'm just showing you how smart I am. They're communal with nature, and God being within nature. Those concepts, those might be very helpful for you to kind of read up or read their memoirs and get a feel. But you don't even have to read somebody else's memoirs to understand the nature of God. You just got to look at your own life and get to a place where you are not in the same old, but you're out in a beautiful place. Grand Canyon is a beautiful place to go out, like, wow. Or or a thunderstorm, or water for me, going out to the beach or going out to moving water, um, can help you feel the energy of God, the source. And that's how you're building your intuition can also help you um, develop that relationship with source. Intuition is a funny thing. Intuition doesn't always come to us in words. As a matter of fact, words are the last thing our subconscious or higher conscious mind gives us, because it doesn't speak in language. Again, you might get one or two words, or um, maybe, but it's mostly a feeling or a sense of. For instance, clairvoyance, you have colors or pictures or something that you're daydreaming, but that daydream grows into something else, and you're no longer influencing it or in control of it. That's source speaking to you. That's your soul. That's God speaking to you. Now, I've talked many times about the different clairs and the different ways of sensing. Clairaudient isn't necessarily it could be a song. It could be a flow of rhythms together. It could be some words that are strung together in a different way that has a different meaning than you thought. Um, Clairsentient is total feeling it through your body, feeling it, maybe just feeling it around you, or having a sense of something, and on it goes. So building your senses, and not so much in your mind, but building your senses also is a very good pathway to being able to feel the presence of God within. Remember, we talked about God is within and within us, and it's within everything around us, and God is around us. That's source. Think of it as source. I have to kind of get away from God the Father kind of thing, because I get hung up, I get triggered into, this is, am I doing it right? Am I doing it wrong? But if I go into the feeling of it, I feel I can really blend, and I can go with the flow of source. The source is the flow. It is the source. It's a river of energy. Um, and that meditation practice that I started talking about is a very powerful way of you just simply do it with your breath. You breathe in spirit, breathe out and relax into spirit, and you simply surrender. And when the thoughts by you, or the feelings come by you, hey, now that you're quiet, can I have your attention on all these things I've been wanting you to fix? You say, thank you for making yourself known, and you kind of set them aside. I'll come back to you later. Um, and you got to go underneath all of that, and not spend a quiet time thinking about everything under the sun, but go underneath all of it until there's nothing. And that's when you meet source. And I do that a lot with my clients. um, when I'm working in my mentorships, we do spend time opening up sacred space. And if I can wrestle them down into letting themselves go there for more than a minute, that's awesome. But this is, I think, the biggest key in healing, and is connecting to source. The biggest key in psychologically calming yourself down is connecting to source. So I really want to encourage you to try these things, to take a look at these things, take a look at, not from your mind, but from your experiential self, to find the essence of source, and begin to have your one-on-one relationship with God, the source, however you want to address this spirit. It's up to you. And I recommend that you take a look at Divine Love Affair and Akashic Journey. And I also, on my website, angelscapes.net, I have discovery sessions if you want to. They're free. They're free. They're for us to talk about what I do, or a question that you might have. They're not readings, but if you want to look at some of the mentorships that I do with people to help them find that relationship with their spiritual self, and that relationship within your essence will just automatically connect you to a relationship with source. So this seems to be a fast talk. I think I talked too fast, but I actually am hoping that this is a very helpful um, piece of information that you can take away and consider. And this is how you can prove yourself to your own self that, yes, there is a source that is beyond me. And yes, I am loved from that source. And I can turn to that source for your own edification, and for your own learning, grace, and manifestation of a happy, abundant life. We want to say hi to Karen and Charles Merritt, Elijah, and Bernie. The sound of the wind in the trees sounds like a running river. You could take the sound of the wind in the trees, or you could take the sound of the running river, and you can let that sound take you to the sound of the flow of source within your soul. I highly recommend that you try that, Bernie. So I'm going to end this episode. And if you have any questions, you can write to me, Nancy@angelscapes.net, or you can private message me on Facebook, Nancy of Angelscapes, or any way that you find that you want to connect with me. And I do recommend using those free discovery sessions. So I bid you adieu until the next episode. Take good care.
Thank you for joining the Angelscapes podcast. We hope you've gained new insights and inspiration for your journey to uncover and access your soul's power. For more information and a deeper dive into finding clarity in your life, go to angelscapes.com. Remember to subscribe so you can be part of the discussion. It may just change your life. See you next time.